Welcome to Beyond the Needle, the Aesthetics Business Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Ruse. I'm a former clinic manager turned digital marketing freelancer, and I've had the privilege of helping dozens of aesthetic practitioners across the UK and beyond grow their business. So I know firsthand just how challenging it can be to build a successful aesthetics practice in today's competitive market. Each week, I'm here to share real, actionable strategies and bring on expert guests to help you level up, attract more patients, and build a standout brand. Let's turn your passion into a thriving business together. Each week, I'm here to share real, actionable strategies and bring on expert guests to help you level up, attract more patients, and build a standout brand. Let's turn your passion into a thriving business together. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Needle podcast. And today's guest, I'm so happy to announce, is Lucy Foster, founder of 3 Medical Aesthetics in Nottingham. With over a decade of nursing experience and a passion for truly patient-centred care, Lucy's journey into aesthetics is as inspiring as it is insightful. She made the transition in 2018, driven by a belief that nurses have so much to offer in this industry, even if they don't always get the recognition that they deserve. Since then, Lucy has faced her fair share of challenges, from navigating the cost and complexity of prescribing to pushing back against the idea that aesthetics should feel like a conveyor belt. She is a big believer in giving every patient the time and personal care that they deserve, something she brings to every appointment and every treatment. In this episode, we cover so much, from how Lucy moved from paediatric nursing to aesthetics and what's driven her along the way, the prescribing hurdles that she faced as a nurse and how she overcame them, her honest take on the Wild West side of aesthetics and why the new prescribing guidelines are so important, imposter syndrome, becoming a trainer and finding confidence as a nurse in a doctor-dominated space, the bedside manner and deep care that set nurses apart in aesthetics, the hard lessons she's learned renovating her first clinic and why it's not as glamorous as it looks from the outside, and her hopes for the future of aesthetics and her advice for nurses who are thinking about making the leap. Lucy's story is a powerful reminder that there's more than one path to success in aesthetics, and that a patient-first approach is always the right one. So whether you're a practitioner, an inspiring injector, or just curious about how to build a business that stays true to your values, this conversation you won't want to miss. Hi Lucy, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So Lucy, tell me, you have over a decade of nursing experience and you moved into aesthetics in 2018. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into aesthetics and what inspired you to make the transition?
Yeah, so it's quite a long journey actually, and it's actually really nice to sit and reflect about it because it all kind of happened so quickly. But I think it's probably very similar to a lot of other nurses out there that have gone into aesthetics, particularly the beginning. So starting way back, kind of school, didn't really enjoy school. Didn't really find, my feet with the academic side of things. I was a lot more practical. And from there, kind of went on straight away to college to do a health studies diploma because A levels just didn't appeal to me at all. So from a young age, really, I always wanted to be a nurse, which sounds a bit corny, but it's true. From around the age of 7, I remember writing a letter what we wanted to be when we grow up, and it was a nurse. I think before that I was a vet, and then I realised that actually I only wanted to look after dogs, so that wasn't going to be a very fruitful career. So yeah, and then from there went straight to university to do nursing, and went straight into paediatrics, so children's nursing. Did that for 3 years, doing the diploma, and just loved it. Loved the practical side of it. It was intense, and I think as nurses we don't really get that full university experience of going out every night and enjoying that side of university. It was quite strict in terms of having to go to so many of your lectures, understandably, and we were doing lots of placements, so lots of nursing shifts straight away. So from the age of 18, I'd be doing night shifts and weekend shifts and missing out on, those events, and working between Christmas and New Year. So it kind of is just something that you're used to doing from a young age. And finished my nursing diploma, and I can't remember what it was that triggered me to want to do the degree, but I topped up to the nursing degree quite soon after. You had certain, I think it was 12 months, you had to sign up for that. So I did the nursing degree, and I think that's really helped me moving forward now. And then I started straight into nursing. From when I finished my training, I was still a little bit unsure of what kind of speciality I wanted to move into. So I went to Nottingham and started doing a rotation where you work in various different departments. The first one being surgical orthopedics. Then I moved to an assessment unit, which was quite similarly linked or similar to A&E. And then I went to paediatric intensive care, which was the most difficult of all three, understandably. And for me, just wasn't my avenue. I really struggled with that side of the nursing. And then I moved to Manchester. I told you it was quite a long journey. So moved to Manchester, and at this point I was really interested in accident and emergency, and just that buzz that you got from, the fast-paced work of, way of working. And with Manchester being a major trauma centre, obviously you saw a great deal of weird and wonderful traumas, and really enjoyed my time there. At that point, I was a little bit, I found myself becoming a little bit kind of unsure where I was going. So I was a band five staff nurse at this point. And because I'd gone straight from school, college, university into my work, I'd never really had that bit of travel or that break. And I got to the point where I thought I'm ready to do a little bit of that. And I always wanted to move to Australia, or just to go and experience a bit of Australia and to try the nursing out there. But I ended up in the Middle East randomly. I ended up in Abu Dhabi, which is not far from Dubai. And I went into a role very different to what I was used to. So it was a clinical case manager, which I didn't really know what it was, to be honest, but I knew, I was ready to give anything a go and try something new. So very different to the A&E work. And this was essentially working with hospitals, quite closely with Emirati families and hospitals, and liaising, making sure that these children that were going back home had everything that they needed at home. They had the nurses that were going in to care for them. They had all of the equipment that they needed. And it was full on. I started working for a company. It was a new founded company, and this was a new role that they developed. So I had no one to no footsteps to follow in, which was good in a way because you could kind of merge your own path, but found it quite difficult. And the hours were very long. I was working about 70-hour weeks. I was working at all different times of the day and in the evening, because if that family needed you, then you needed to be there on hand. So I was on call a lot of the time. My phone would be going off. So the vision of going over there and doing the travel and experiencing that side of things didn't quite work out. So I did that for about a year, and then I was ready to come home, moved back home, and then decided to go to London. So home for me is Nottingham. So I just thought I'm not quite ready to settle back down. So moved to London, and that's when I went into the clinical education role. So I worked in a NHS facility first, a cardiothoracic facility, as a clinical nurse educator. And then I moved into the private sector and worked as a clinical educator, leading the paediatric team in a private hospital. And I did that for about 2 years before I found it was becoming a lot more managerial, and I was finding myself office based, which many nurses probably listening to this is not forte. For me, I like to be hands on, bedside, but it had become a lot more, with it being a senior role, a lot more managerial. And I just kind of lost the passion for that, and I missed the nursing side of things. But equally, being in London, I didn't want to go back to the band 5 role. I didn't want to go back to the shift work. I'd not done that for a long time. So I persevered for a little bit. And then I got to a point where I remember it so clearly. I was stood at the photocopier, and I'd probably been there it was probably the fifth or sixth time I'd been at the photocopier that morning. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, something needs to change. I was really not happy in this role. And I thought, I can't do this for another 30 years. And that's when I really started to think about the aesthetics. I'd actually developed a bit of an interest in it when I was in the Middle East, because it was something that they were quite open about over there. And I was seeing these women, and they were absolutely beautiful. And, they had the money and the facilities to have these treatments. So my interest had started kind of around then. And then when I was in London, I thought, you know what, it's now or never. I've got to do it. And because I was living in London, obviously the training facilities were local around there. And it was actually whilst I was at work, I went online and I just signed up straight away for the level 7. I hadn't even thought about just going and doing a foundation course. I just thought, you know what, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly. I'm all in. So thankfully, I enjoyed the foundation day, because obviously I'd already, signed up. And what I'd also done before I signed up is I remember emailing, it must have been about 5 or 6 different clinics. And I just remember messaging them and saying, if you need someone that, can help out, can do, I'm happy to help with stock. I can help with this, that, the other. I just really wanted to get my foot into the aesthetics world, but I had no background whatsoever. And I think I got one response, and this person basically, politely said, you need to have some experience in aesthetics. You can't just turn up, which is understandable. But that's where I kind of thought, right, I need to do it. So I signed up and started the journey. So yeah, that was probably back in 2017, 18 when I was thinking about it. And I started the training in 2019. And yeah, haven't looked back since. So a good kind of over 5 years of doing the aesthetics now.
Amazing. And we'll talk more about the level 7 and your journey and with training and things like that shortly. But I remember you saying to me when we had our a call before recording this episode that you sometimes think there's a bit of a stigma around nurses working in aesthetics, or that they don't belong in aesthetics. Why do you think that's the case, and how have you navigated it throughout
I
your
think there's
journey?
a couple of different views on this. So I think from a general public point of view, we're nurses and we care for other people, and that's what we should be doing. And it's not everybody, but I've definitely found there's a certain, I'm definitely better at it now. But I remember when I first started doing aesthetics, and I would meet people, and they would ask what, obviously the first thing people say is what do you do? What do you do for a living? And I remember just saying, I'm a nurse. And my partner Sam would be like, tell people what you do. Why are you, it was like I was embarrassed, or I was worried that they were going to judge me before they'd even judged me. And it took me a long time, because the first thing you say is, well, I'm an aesthetics practitioner. Half people don't know what that means. So then they're saying, what does that mean? And you're like, oh, Botox and filler. Or people will say, oh, is that, doing the Botox and filler? Which, yes, but there's so much more to it than that. So I think from a public point of view, as nurses, you should be patient facing, you should be there on the front line, helping, obviously for me, children and families. And, obviously there's still that kind of guilt, I guess, that I carry, that I don't do that anymore. But I do find what I do now is still so fulfilling, and I'm still really helping people, just in very different ways. But to explain that, you don't, why should we have to explain that to everybody? I think from that point of view, it's kind of, people view this as a beauty industry, and it's skin deep, but we know that there's so much more to it than that. And I'm hoping that through education and understanding, that that's going to shift. I think also then, from the flip side of that, is more within the industry. Don't get me wrong, there's a huge amount of support for nurses in the aesthetics industry, but there's still, I do feel, a little bit of a hierarchy system, perhaps, that I feel sometimes. For example, we have these conferences that we go to, and they're great and they're really helpful and they're really good at networking and getting you kind of growing your interest in the industry. But there's been multiple times that I've probably been to one of these conferences, and I've gone over to one of the stands where they're promoting a machinery or they're promoting a product, and obviously you have your badge, your name badge, and it tells them what you are or who you are and what you do. And I've had someone physically move their body away from me and talk to my colleague who was a doctor, and not say anything to me, but makes you kind of feel slightly inferior. And then there's the odd time where I've gone to go into one of these the presentations, and they scan your badge, and your badge doesn't say the right thing. So yeah, I think as well, I think there is a bit of that nurses probably, and I'll be completely honest with you, before I did my aesthetics training, there's absolutely no way I would have been able to inject a face and to have done this without the intense training that I've done. In nursing school, we don't go through a lot of the anatomy. You obviously do, of course you touch on it, but it's so basic when you think about it now. When I look back and I think I had no idea about the muscles and the tissues and the layers of the face and the skin, and that was not touched on in nursing. I'd never injected a face, I was a paediatric nurse. I'd never injected a face before. So don't get me wrong, I don't think we do leave our training with the same, we're not on a level playing field at that point. But I do think nurses that have gone through the intensive training, and like myself, it was 18 months of training before I even felt ready to set up the business. So and I'm training every day, and doing the prescribing, which we can talk more about. And so I do think that there's a few different views from it. But like I said, it's getting better, and I do think nurses are certainly, there's some amazing nurse practitioners that are leading the way.
And I think there's a nice community of nurses within aesthetics as well, like with the Nurses Network, for example. And I know BAN as well. It's like a nice community where you all kind of support each other. I mean, I know a lot of people listening will probably really resonate with what you said about, going to conferences and feeling there's that hierarchy. Has that, affected your confidence with going to things, or how have you dealt with it?
I've not allowed it to affect going to these things. I kind of allow it to, and like I say, it's few and far between. It's not every time I've been and every person I go up to. And I think as long as you have that knowledge, I think if you're new into this industry, it could affect you, and it could make you feel, that you don't want to go. Or, but I think going and, knowing what you do and that you do a good job and asking the right questions, and it hasn't impacted me going to these conferences now. And I actually spoke at one of the conferences only recently, which has obviously been a great confidence boost for me. So really thankful that these brands are happy to promote nurses and work with nurses, and they see what we can bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking back at your nursing background when you were working in the NHS, what skills would you say have been most valuable in your aesthetics work that you've kind of brought with you into your new role?
I would definitely say your interpersonal skills. So I think obviously as nurses, I don't know if it's built in us or it's not really something that you learn. It's kind of something that's within you. So I guess that caring side of the way that you work, having an understanding of why people are there. Obviously, I started having aesthetics treatments before I started offering aesthetics treatments, and it was that understanding of how they made me feel. I guess pressure, you can work well under pressure. My business is very different to my work in the NHS, and I don't do it as often, but I still do go and do agency work because it's really good to bring you back down to earth and remind you of, that nursing in A&E is very different to nursing in aesthetics, but you can still be faced with, these problems and complications. And I've had episodes where I've had patients faint. I've had one very severe facial swelling from hyaluronidase, the dissolvent, and just being able to keep calm. Obviously, when you're working in A&E, you're in a team. If you have a problem, you pull that buzzer and everyone comes running. You don't have that option in aesthetics. And, luckily, things don't go wrong as often in aesthetics if you're doing things correctly. But it's lots of different skills that you can bring together. And I think just having that time and giving your patients that one-to-one time and not making them feel like it's a conveyor belt system and that you're not listening to them, that you are, when they are in your room, they are your priority. And that's very similar to when you're triaging a patient in A&E. At the time, that is your priority, and that, patient is your number one, thought at that
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. When you first entered aesthetics, prescribing was a big challenge for you, wasn't it, as a paediatric nurse? Can you talk about how that initially impacted your practice?
Yeah, so obviously, as a pediatric nurse, for me, my roles, I've not needed to be a prescriber. It's not something, unlike doctors, and we don't come out of nursing school as prescribers. So it's something that, you either fund yourself or you have funded if it's something you need within your role. And within my role, I hadn't needed it. And I think within pediatrics, you're very wary of actually becoming a prescriber because it's that pressure then that you're making. You have a septic baby and you want to make sure that you're getting it right. So, yeah, when I first started the aesthetics, I wasn't a prescriber. But obviously, to be able to administer Botox, botulinum toxin, you have to be a prescriber or have that patient seen by a prescriber. And most patients don't know that. They don't know that these certain things are medications and drugs essentially at the end of the day. So I did everything the right way. I found a prescriber that I worked very closely with who was brilliant. I remember, firstly, I put a message on a Facebook group just asking for a prescriber, in this area, I'm looking for a prescriber. And you'd be amazed how many people contacted me from all over the country and were happy to prescribe for me without having to come and sit in clinic with me. But I knew, because I'd done my research, that actually I needed someone there face to face to see these patients. And yeah, so I worked very closely. I would set up prescribing nights where I would have lots of so essentially your prescriber has to be in that room with you seeing your patients, and you can't treat your patients at the same appointment. So you essentially bring all your patients in that you're wanting to prescribe for. I was doing the consultation, I was asking all the questions, and the prescriber would sit in the room. And together we would say, yes, we're happy. And it would be a 10-minute, 10-15 minute appointment to just see this patient, talk through their medical history. They'd filled all their forms out beforehand and we'd reviewed them prior to them coming in, and just making sure that this patient was able to go ahead with treatment. And then they would go away and we would, my prescriber would develop a prescription. It was very financially difficult because I didn't make money on these treatments for a long time because I'm paying for the room rental and I'm not charging. My decision was to kind of charge the patient the fee, but this fee was then for my prescriber. So my prescriber would charge a fee per person per prescription. And this can vary, and it still does vary, and I think it's going to increase even more since the new regulations came out. But this can vary from £20 to £40, if not more. And this is per patient per prescription. So you have, if you need something else for this patient, it was a separate fee. So I would probably see 8 to 10 patients, and then we would create these prescriptions. And so you're paying for your room rental, you're paying for your prescription, you're then paying for the product. And at the end of it, you're not really making much profit whatsoever. But I just had to persevere because I knew that obviously Botox was going to be a huge interest of my patients, and most of my patients, that was what they were after. So I persevered, and then I realized that actually, if I'm going to do this series, I'd done the level 7. I was doing this pretty much at this point. I was still part time in the NHS, but most of my time was focused on my aesthetics. So I realized that I needed to do it seriously. So I signed up to do my prescribing, and it made all the
Mm.
difference, huge difference.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what was the experience like doing your prescriber course, and how has it kind of changed now how you work?
Because I found it really difficult. Like I said, I've
Hmm.
never really been hugely academic,
Yeah.
and this was all like pharmacology, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. I'd never really heard about all of this, which was actually worrying when I thought about it, because I've been treating patients and I needed to have a better understanding of these things and how exactly these medications were working. But it's a very general training. You don't, obviously, you specify that you're working within aesthetics, and obviously you know what kind of medications that you're wanting to prescribe, but you still do the same training as everybody else. It was actually because it was, oh, I think it was 2021, 22, so they were still offering virtual training for the prescribing, as in your lectures and everything were virtual, but you still had to go and do your one-to-ones and your assessments all in person. And I found that really difficult, actually, because I quite quickly lose interest if something's going over my head. And I found myself, having to really pull myself together to sit and sit through these lectures. And I didn't have that support around me. When you're in a lecture and you can sit around a table afterwards and have a chat about, you know did you understand this bit? I'm struggling with that. Don't get me wrong, we had WhatsApp groups, and I'm still in contact with these girls now, and we really helped each other through. But I found it really difficult. It was 6 months, and it was 6 intensive months, and it was all consuming. It was all I thought about when I woke up, and it was all I thought about when I went to bed. And I've never invested so much time into my studies, because one, I'd funded it myself and I was going to do this, and I only had one shot at it. So I knew if I wanted my practice to be a success, I needed to do it. So I put everything into it, and yeah, it paid off. I passed the course, and I learned so much along the way. And obviously, when you're doing it, you go and work with a practitioner very closely who assesses you. And I learned so much from them. This was actually, strangely enough, this was a woman I used to work with in the A&E role back in Manchester, so back in my early 20s. And she reached out to me to say that she was happy to be my assessor, and we worked very closely together, and I learned so much from her. So it's been a great success, a great experience, and I'm very glad that I did it. And it certainly changed my practice. Has it, it's not hugely changed my practice, because I still had that time for my patients. I still made sure I did everything correctly and as safely as could be. But it just gives me more autonomy. It gives me more of that holistic approach. And the patient has a problem, that it's me that sorts it. I don't need to rely on anybody else to do that. So yeah, it has changed my practice for sure.
It must give you that level of peace of mind that obviously you can prescribe that hyaluronidase if you need to, and you have
Exactly.
more control, I guess, over how you work. And obviously, there have been new guidelines that
Yeah,
have come into place around face-to-face consultations for prescribing. What do you think about the changes?
I think they did. I think they're very much needed, and I think it's probably the first sign that this industry is starting to be taken a little bit more seriously. So essentially, yes. So the NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, have brought out some guidelines so that all cosmetic, non-surgical injectables that are medications such as Botox and your emergency kits need to be through a face-to-face prescription. Like I said, I had people contacting me when I was looking for a prescriber who were quite happy to prescribe for me, but they were based on the other side of the country, and they were happy to see my patients virtually. And I knew that that wasn't the way that things needed to be. I have friends that have treatments down in London, and they've never seen a prescriber, but they go to a salon for treatments. They see a non-prescriber to inject their Botox. They don't know. People don't know that these are medications and they need a prescription. And it's more about the awareness for the general public. And I think it's great that it's becoming a more spoken about on social media. It's on the news, it's in the media, it's on the radio. I think people are becoming more aware. I've never had anyone ask me, "Are you a prescriber?" when they come for an appointment, but obviously I think I make it quite clear. And I always tell them that these are medications. And you'd be amazed how many patients I see that have had treatments for years and have never, one, never been told about some of these complications, two, have never seen a prescriber, and three, probably don't feel confident or comfortable that they could go back to their practitioner if they had a problem. So I think it's certainly a step in the right direction, but I do worry that people are still going to find loopholes. People have found loopholes for many years, and I do wonder and worry that people are going to find more, because who's going to want to have it's going to flip some practitioners, upside down, because they don't have to pay, or, they do it virtually, so it's probably a cheaper prescription. We don't know where they're getting these products from. The general public don't know that there's only certain licensed products that you can use. So I think it's gonna, hopefully work in a very positive way, but I do worry that there's going to be more loopholes and more black market products out there. I'm constantly getting messages, and I think many other practitioners are getting the same messages from random Bob from Liverpool, who is going to get me this
Even
product.
I get them.
Honestly, get this product for free, no prescription needed, can get it to you on the
Yeah.
same day. Like, I just don't know how people can sleep that are getting these products, but
And yeah,
there are people doing
yeah,
it.
yeah. And I think, yeah, the general public just think, well, we live in a country where, or they assume, or we live in a country where if it was dangerous, people wouldn't be allowed to do it. So then they trust it because it's being offered.
Absolutely.
And you said in our initial call that I think you described the aesthetics industry as the Wild West at times. Obviously, you've outlined a couple of reasons why. Is there anything else that you think is quite concerning?
I think social media is really going to be quite damaging as well. I'm constantly seeing that. I mean, I'm probably not as active on social media as I should be, but it's the things that you see, or patients coming in saying, "Oh, I saw this thing on TikTok, and this person has no medical background. They have no, you know, th- they've no experience in aesthetics, but they seem to be knowing this, that, and the other." I mean, some of the cases I've seen, where patients come and they look completely different to what they looked like. They show me pictures of themselves from 5 years ago, and they look completely different. I mean, I had a patient come to me who, we talk about filler blindness when we talk about in the aesthetics industry, and that's where you have some patients that they're so far gone with their treatments that actually they forget what they looked like before, and they haven't got the practitioner to turn around and say, "I'm not going to treat you," or "You don't need this," or "We need to dissolve this, we need to start." And I had a poor patient who came to me after seeing herself on television, and she said, "I really didn't believe that was me when I looked at myself." She said, "I don't see that when I look in the mirror, but when I saw myself on television, I don't recognize myself." And I brought her in, and you could just feel lumps of filler. And she said she'd not had filler for a couple of years at that point, but you could feel, chin, it just felt like a golf ball, her cheeks, and she was also modeling, but she said that she'd lost some work. She wasn't doing as much anymore, and now she's kind of figured out why, that it was perhaps to do with how she was and how she also felt, because she'd lost her confidence completely. And it was just so sad to see, that someone had taken advantage of this patient. She was so young when she started treatment. She was only mid to late 20s when I saw her, and she'd been having treatments a good 5 to 6 years. So it's really difficult, because you want to help every patient that comes to you. And I get messages quite often from people I've never met but have had this treatment, and this has happened, and can I do anything to help them? And you have to be really careful, because once you treat that patient, they're your responsibility. You don't know what's been injected. There's so many products out there. There's so many unlicensed products, but people, again, because it's unregulated, nobody knows. Filler is filler. People think, well, why is this treatment? Why is lip filler with you this price, but lip filler with so and so down the road is this price? Like, I'm going to go, of course, go for the cheaper option. But people don't realize that actually you've got your really lovely high-end premium products and you've got your very poor quality lower end products, and they're going to give completely different results. And obviously the person injecting them has not got the same skill, and there's a lot more risk with with your treatments like that. So it's certainly kind of things that you've seen, and trying to educate a lot more, and just kind of share with people what is normal and what we expect to see, and hope that I'm definitely seeing, I think probably because of where I'm based and my prices, and what kind of things I promote on social media, I do see patients that want very, very natural results, very undetectable results. I don't have anyone come in and say, I saw this Russian lip technique and I must have this, because I don't promote that kind of work. But there's certainly a niche of patients that do want that.
Yeah. And on that note of fillers, I'm finding through people I've had on here, people I speak to obviously through my work and stuff, that filler fear mongering seems to be on the rise, or a lot of people are scared of filler. There seems to be a lot of negative things out on social media about filler. I think we've gone through that phase a few years ago where like all these celebrities had, you know, big overfilled lips, overfilled chins, cheeks, jawlines, you name it, and now they all seem to be dissolving them. What do you think about fillers and filler fear mongering? And have you noticed a decline in people requesting filler treatments in your own practice?
I don't know if I've seen a decline, but I've seen a real increase in requests for more biostimulatory, more skin rejuvenation treatments. So I've definitely seen that. I think with the fillers, it's more to do with kind of understanding, yeah, these celebrities are having them dissolved, but they're having them probably put back in, but they're having them done very well now, and they're using much better, products. So I think it's more to do with, seeing how long we tend to say with products they can last 6 to 9 months. There is now evidence that obviously these products can last a lot longer. But if you're putting them in the right place and you're using the right products and you're injecting them correctly, then for me they're still life changing, and they're still, definitely there's definitely a place for them. I think it's reducing the amount of fillers that we've been using in the past, perhaps, is where we need to be looking, and incorporating them within your practice, within other treatments that you're offering. And the skin rejuvenation, obviously we know that biostimulatory treatments have had a huge increase. Your polynucleotides, your injectable skin boosters, your radio frequency ultrasound treatments are really starting to pave the way. But I think there's definitely a place for fillers still, and I think there always will be, providing that people are using them respectfully and in the right way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And then moving on to something else that we've talked about before. So you are now training with acquisition aesthetics, is that right? Which is amazing.
Yes.
But you mentioned questioning whether you were actually good enough to be a trainer. Can you tell me a little bit more about those feelings, that imposter syndrome, why that might have creeped in and how you deal with it?
See, like I mentioned at the beginning, I was a clinical educator within my nursing role, but at that point, I'd been nursing about 7 or 8 years. So I felt like I had a good understanding of of what we were doing, and the confidence to train other nurses, particularly new nurses, and starting out. But my real my passion is education. I really do enjoy it, and I had only been doing aesthetics for probably 3 years when I was speaking to a friend and colleague, and another very well known, amazing injector. And I kind of said to her, I'm really interested, and, but I don't feel like, am I ready? Is this the right time? And she just said, do it. Like, just apply. What's the worst that can happen? And I remember just contacting them, giving them an idea of my background, what I did, and how long I'd been doing aesthetics for. And yeah, the process, I was interviewed, I had a practical examination, and I got the role. And it definitely took me time to kind of feel like I belonged in that, part of aesthetics, the education side. But I think when you are really into something and you're very passionate about something, it comes quite naturally. And I found actually the more that I'm doing these training days and coming across practitioners very similar to me in terms of how they started out, and that they're at that point they need to make a change. And it's really fulfilling to be able to support them in that journey. So I guess, yeah, just doing it. And I thought, that what's the worst that can happen? I could only be told that I'm not ready and try again. But yeah, and I've learned so much from other trainers that I work with as well. We all are given that autonomy to kind of, train in a way that we feel is suited, providing it's within their guidelines. And I'm learning, and we're always learning because there's always new treatments coming out. There's always new. So we do lots of the trainer days where we are being taught about these treatments and learning that way. And it's really helped actually my confidence within my clinics, because my education skills for my patients is really improved as well.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's almost like you're constantly getting your own knowledge and your skills topped up through the training that you're doing and being involved with that group of trainers. And do you find that it's quite a supportive environment with all of the other trainers? Can you kind of help each other out and teach each other different things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's such a great team. And there's a real mix as well. We've got, nurses, doctors, dentists, and we're all very supportive of each other. And like I said, I might see someone doing something a certain way, and I've never seen that. And I think it's great that we can bounce off each other in that sense. And yeah, the support from the team is incredible, and that definitely helps your confidence. And just getting the feedback as well, it's really nice to get feedback from the delegates that come in, and to have that feedback and how you made them feel, and that they felt really comfortable. Because I remember, my God, I remember my first, like I said, I went straight into the level 7, but I started with the foundation day. And I remember it was like my driving test. I was so nervous to, just like I said, I'd never injected a face. And I remember I had one opportunity to inject in one area of the face, and it was a little injection underneath the eyebrow. And my hand was shaking so much that the trainer had to hold my hand still. And I injected this patient. And as I removed the needle, she had the biggest bruise. And I was absolutely mortified. And I remember thinking, I can't do this. And then I thought, well, I've signed up for the level 7, so I'm going to have to. But it really knocked my confidence. And I think, yeah, having, that understanding, and I've not been doing it that long, so I'm very much in those early days where I understand how it feels, and that nerves are real. We do get nervous about these things, but actually, yeah, it's really, I really enjoy the training side of things.
Amazing. And on to patient care and kind of the nurse touch. You've spoken about the bedside manner that comes with being a nurse. How do you think that sets nurses apart in aesthetics?
I think, like I said, and then I also mentioned to you about kind of some of the time I spend with patients. I'm very much, when I first started out, I did do a short stint working for a doctor as his aesthetics nurse, and I'd have 15 minutes with each patient. And this was me introducing myself, getting to know the patient, going through their medical history, doing the treatment, getting the pictures, and doing the notes. 15 minutes, which
Mm,
obviously you just can't do. And I think, yeah, spending that time with those patients, and actually, so many of my patients are really good. I've become really lovely friends to but not in a very professional manner, but they come in, we sit down for a good half an hour, we'll just chat, we'll talk about what's going on for them. People aren't just coming but from, a point of view that they just need their Botox and that's it. A lot of the time it's so much more than that. And for them, this might be their one bit of, 1 hour to themselves since, they've had their new baby, and they just need that bit of time. The treatments are so, can be so quick. We know, a Botox treatment is very quick, but it's actually having that time with them before. And I think as a nurse, I guess as a nurse, you don't really have that as much as well. And I think that's why I'm making up for it now, because in your nursing role, you do have to see patients and you do have to triage them very quickly, and then you're on to the next patient. And I think I've always wished I had more time with some of them. So I guess now I've incorporated that into my practice, that I can do that. I am, my own boss. I can spend as much or as little time with my patients, and it's really nice that I can do that. And I think for them, it makes them feel special. It makes them feel that this is that one bit of time that they can just be a bit more selfish and talk about them. And it's not selfish, but they feel that they're being selfish, doing this treatment for themselves, or leaving, their kids at home when they should be kind of with them. But it's having that understanding as to why people are coming in. It is so much more than just having injectables. I think it's all to do with and assessing, their mental health as well. People come in that are really feeling quite low about themselves. And, it's not always the right thing for us to treat them, but it's kind of getting that understanding and not just turning them away, but just kind of getting to a point where you feel that you've spent that time with them that they deserve. They're paying for a treatment, and they're paying for an experience. And I think my nursing it's definitely helped with that, because obviously nurses, we are caring, and we are, concerned for our patients, but we don't have enough time with them in the hospital setting.
Yeah, experience, that's the word I was going to use, because it's going beyond just a treatment. It's an experience. They're coming in, they're having that chat with you, they're talking about that, like almost like a friend, like you say. And that is really going to help with your patient retention, like massively, because they've got that connection and that rapport with you. And do you find that you have quite high patient retention because of that?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I have a lot of referrals as well. So a lot
Mm,
of friend and family referrals, which is always the biggest compliment, because you know that you,
yeah.
you wouldn't tell your friend or your sister or your mum to go to somebody that you didn't trust. So I do. I've had patients that have literally been, when I started out in my parents' bedroom, that were my first few patients, and I still see them today, and they've been on this journey with me. So I do find, yeah, my patient retention is very high, which is lovely. And I'm happier with that than seeing, constant turnover of patients. And that's why I'm very cautious of doing, deals and offers and cheap treatments, because I think you do find that people probably don't respect you the same if you do that. Or you do get a lot of, every now and then, when I started out particularly, I would be doing model deals because I just needed to get some social media content, and also just practice. And you would get so many people contact you that probably weren't even following you, but had somehow come across it. And, you know, you'd either see them and then never see them again, because they would probably just go to the
Go
next.
from clinic to
Yeah,
clinic.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, for me, I like to see the same patients, and I might only see them 3 or 4 times a year, if that, but it's really nice to catch up with them. And I've been on people's journeys from, getting married to then having their first child, to, seeing it all the way through. So it's really nice.
Amazing. And you recently renovated your first clinic. What was the experience of that like? And what's been the biggest lesson from going through that process?
Wow, I'm still going through the process. It's very slow. I've always wanted my own space. And again, this is where you kind of compare yourself to others. And I think, I was 5 years in, and I thought I really need my own space. What I'd been doing before was renting spaces, which actually worked really well for me, because I am based in Derby, Nottingham, and London. And obviously I wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. So it's been really great and, helpful in that sense. But I was ready for my own property. So yeah, so I'm currently going through the process of the renovation, and there's so much more to it than I thought. I thought, lick of paint, get some nice decorative pieces in there. Yeah, and it's just a lot of the little things that you don't really think about. I mean, I'm dreaming about light switches and, how I want these light switches to work, dimmers or what color to be, and getting trades to commit and kind of,
Yeah, fine
get
lines in
them.
place. Yeah.
Exactly. And I want things doing yesterday. And obviously, for me, it's a priority, but people are busy. So it's a work in progress. We have hopefully an end of next month. We're hoping to be launching and opening. And at the minute, I'm still, trying to work as much as I can to kind of see my patients and make it as less, upheaval as possible. But yeah, it's a long process, and it's a lot more. There's a lot more to think about than I thought, but yeah, it was time. I was ready for it, and I'm excited.
Have you had any support through the process, like with interior design or anyone like that, or are you managing it all on your own?
Yeah, I've had support from Lindsay, who is a fantastic interior designer. She specializes in clinic and salon design. Because I very much I know my branding. I've got my branding colors, and I know what I wanted, but actually just putting it down on paper has been a bit more difficult. And yeah, she's been really helpful in that sense. So brand interior agency. And my partner Sam actually has been fantastic. So he, God love him, has been the biggest support throughout my entire career. He's seen me from my nursing days all the way up until today, and he was the one that really pushed me to leave the NHS because he saw what it was doing. And he's always been my biggest supporter. He's been fantastic. So he's been really helpful despite doing his own, doing his 9 to 5. He has been every evening, every weekend. He has been at the clinic, putting his hand to lots of different jobs. And he knows what I'm like. And if I want something doing, I want it done then,
Properly.
and I want it done properly. So he has been fantastic. But yeah, it's certainly not something you can do by yourself. And I'm lucky I've got my brother-in-law's helping with the plumbing, and I've got contacts and people to lean on. But it's yeah, it's been a long process. But having the support of patients and seeing how excited they are to see the space and join me there. So it's really,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it will be worth the hard work when it's fully finished and come together and you're in there.
Absolutely.
And yeah, exciting. Are there any kind of tips that you'd give practitioners who are in a similar boat thinking about opening their first clinic and are wondering where the hell to start?
Oh, I know. I think give it time. I
Hmm.
was always in such a rush to do it. And I remember even I'd probably only been doing aesthetics about a year, and I'd be looking at properties and I think, right, yeah, I can do this. But I didn't, I was still building up the business. I think make sure that you're not rushing into it because it's a big commitment, and you want to make sure that you've got, I know I'm going to be opening and I'm going to have patients coming in the doors, which is obviously, less daunting, but give it time. The right property will come up in the right place. And, until then, there's lots of other options for renting spaces and working. It's probably not ideal for you at this point, and you're ready for the next stage. And again, don't let that imposter syndrome take over, because that's what I was allowing. But it's worked out at the right time for me within my career and where I'm at.
Amazing. No, amazing advice. So, for any nurses or practitioners who are thinking about entering aesthetics, what's one piece of advice that you wish you'd gotten when you first started out?
That one, though, just about kind of not rushing the process. It's a lot of time, financial commitment. You're not going to be able to go and do a foundation day and then set up a clinic and be a successful practitioner. I mean, whether people can do them, then perhaps, but I certainly would not have been able to do that. It's not something that you're going to start making lots of money in. I think that's another misconception that people have. I remember particularly from my nursing peers when I was still working part-time and doing my aesthetics, there would be a little bit of judgment from some of my peers who, thought that I'm doing it for quick and easy money, and it's certainly not that way. It takes a long time. I was very unfortunate that actually I got started with my aesthetics business I actually moved home to get it going in February 2020, and we went into lockdown in March 2020. So I had a really, like a lot of other businesses, I had a really bad start to getting going, and it's taken me years to get to the point where I'm at now. And you want to give up so many times because you're kind of thinking there's just no way I can do this. But if you're really serious about it and you take it seriously and you invest the time, the effort, the money into it, then it can be really successful for you. But I think it's just knowing that it's not going to be easy. And I don't think I quite realized how difficult it was going to be. As a nurse, business was not my forte. And it still isn't. I'm still learning along the way, but it doesn't come naturally to me as a nurse. And, putting that hat on has been quite difficult. But at the end of the day, if you want to have a successful business, you have to understand your business as well as be caring and for your patients, and finding that balance for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Oh, amazing advice. And for anyone who wants to learn more about you or your journey or connect with you on social media, where's the best place to find you?
So on Instagram at the minute, it's just a lot of me showing my renovation because I've not got much time for anything else. But I am at three medical aesthetics, and so yeah, I'm on TikTok, but I'm not very active on TikTok, but we're getting there. So yeah, so Instagram is probably the best place. But yeah, I'm always happy to give advice. Obviously, I can only give the advice that I've had myself and that I've gone through, but I've gone through the process and I know how difficult it can be. But if you are thinking about it, then just go for it, give it a go, and if it's meant to be, it will work out for you.
Absolutely. Oh, amazing advice. Oh, it's been so lovely to have you on. You've been so, yeah, amazing, so inspirational. And I'm sure people will take a lot away from this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.